Imagine this: 5 long months of endless cries, sleepless nights, and a father who thought nothing could calm his babies. Then one afternoon he walks into the nursery and sees his twins resting silently in the arms of someone he least expected, his maid. Why did the children stop crying only with her? And what secret was she carrying that could change everything this family thought they knew? The sharp cry thundered through the wide hallways of a luxury brownstone on the Upper East Side. "What the hell are you doing with my kids?" Daniel Carter, a 42-year-old investment banker who had built his empire on precision and control, stood frozen in the doorway of the nursery. His tie was still knotted from a 12-hour day at the firm, his leather briefcase sliding from his sweaty hand. It hit the polished hardwood floor with a violent crack, scattering papers across the Persian rug. What he saw stopped him cold. Maria Lopez, the new housekeeper, hired just 7 days earlier, was mopping the nursery floor. But it wasn't the mop that made Daniel's blood run hot. It was the way she held his twins, as if they had been hers all along. Baby Noah, 5 months old, clung to her back inside a worn fabric sling. His tiny chest rose and fell in the peaceful rhythm of deep sleep, something Daniel hadn't seen in months. Against her chest, little Lily stared up with bright eyes, completely calm, her fingers curled into Maria's shirt, as though she had been born to be there. For 5 unbearable months, those children had been inconsolable. Daniel had paid for the best: top-tier nannies with Ivy League credentials, pediatric specialists, therapists who promised structured routines. Yet nothing had worked. Noah and Lily cried until their throats were raw. They flinched from touch, refused bottles, and turned his once pristine home into a haunted house of wails. Now, in front of him, with a stranger in faded jeans and an old cardigan, his babies were quiet. Not just quiet, peaceful. Maria turned toward him slowly, her movements unhurried, almost deliberate. Her face wasn't apologetic or fearful like he expected. Her dark eyes held a calmness that felt out of place in the chaos of his home. "I'm not hurting them, sir," she said, her voice soft, carrying an accent that curled each word like a lullaby. "I'm only caring for them." Daniel's jaw clenched. He wanted to yell, to demand she put them down, to fire her on the spot, but his throat tightened, betraying him, because while he had been screaming, the twins had not flinched. Lily's little hand stretched toward him, fingers splayed wide, as though for the first time she recognized the man in the doorway as her father. And Noah, who had never opened his eyes without tears streaming down his cheeks, blinked awake in the sling, his gaze steady, curious, free of pain. The marble walls of the nursery, once echoing with endless cries, now held an impossible silence. A silence Daniel didn't know if he should fear or fall to his knees and thank God for. In that instant, Daniel Carter realized something he wasn't ready to admit. The woman he had dismissed as just another housekeeper might be holding the key to saving not only his children, but himself. The silence that had fallen over the nursery clung to Daniel Carter like an invisible weight. He stood there, still gripping the doorframe, his heart pounding in his chest. His throat was dry, and though his mind screamed for him to take control, to demand, to assert, to shout, he could not. His body simply wouldn't obey. Maria's calm eyes were locked on him, unwavering, as though she had known all along this moment would come. She moved gracefully across the room, her mop set aside. With one hand, she gently adjusted the cloth sling that held Noah against her back. With the other, she soothed Lily, pressing the baby closer to her chest. The little girl sighed, her lips curling into the faintest smile. Daniel's knees nearly buckled. He hadn't seen either child smile since they were born. For a long stretch of seconds, he simply stared, every muscle in his body taut. He had spent 5 months drowning in sound. Wails that clawed into his ears, cries that penetrated his bones, endless noise that no amount of money or medication could silence. Now there was only stillness. It was almost eerie, but beneath the eeriness was something else, something fragile and miraculous. "Why are they quiet with you?" His voice was hoarse, uneven. It was not the command of a wealthy father. It was a plea. Maria didn't answer right away. She sat down on the soft nursery rug, cross-legged, careful not to disturb the children. Lily rested in her arms like she belonged there, like she had always belonged there. Noah stirred slightly but did not wake. "You are a stranger to them," she said at last, her voice steady. "Not because you don't love them, but because you don't know how to show it. Babies, they feel everything. They know when someone holds them because they must, and when someone holds them because they want to." Her words stung, piercing straight through the armor Daniel had built over years of being untouchable, unshakable, invincible in business and in life. "I hired the best," he muttered defensively, more to himself than to her. "Specialists, nannies, doctors, everyone failed. How can you succeed when they couldn't?" Maria brushed a hand across Lily's hair, her touch so natural it was almost maternal. "Because I don't see them as problems to solve. I see them as children to love," Daniel inhaled sharply. He wanted to laugh at the absurdity. He was a man of numbers and facts, not of sentiment and poetry. Yet standing there, his baby safe in her arms, her words rang louder than any lecture the so-called professionals had given him. He turned, unable to bear the scene any longer, and stormed out of the nursery. His footsteps thundered down the hallway, but even in his retreat, he noticed the babies had not cried. 3 hours later, Daniel sat alone in his home office, the city skyline glowing beyond the glass walls. A glass of whiskey sat untouched beside him. The amber liquid trembled slightly in the crystal as his hand hovered nearby, but he had no appetite for it. His eyes were fixed on a photograph that sat framed on his desk. Clara, his late wife, smiled at him from behind the glass, her hands resting on her swollen belly, heavy with the twins she never got to raise. Her green eyes sparkled, full of a joy Daniel had never been able to recapture since the night she died. He could still hear her voice, soft and certain, whispering through the sterile hospital air. "They're going to be beautiful, Daniel. They're going to fill your heart with love." She had been right about everything, except she never lived long enough to see it. Daniel's throat constricted as memories clawed their way back. The stormy February night. The blaring hospital alarms. Clara's voice fading as blood drained her body faster than doctors could save her. Her smile as she told him to be strong, even as her life slipped away. And then the silence. The silence of her absence. The twins had survived, but from their first breath they had been marked by tragedy. Premature, fragile, fighting to stay alive. Daniel had tried. God knew he had tried. He had thrown money at every possible solution, convinced wealth could fix anything. But he hadn't known how to hold them. He hadn't known how to love them. And maybe deep down, he hadn't wanted to. The truth burned inside him like acid. Now this woman, this stranger with no degree, no resume of prestige, no polished words, had done what no one else could. He rose abruptly from his chair, pacing the office. His reflection in the window stared back at him, a man who looked powerful but was crumbling inside. His hand brushed the edge of the whiskey glass. He wanted to smash it against the wall, to shatter something tangible instead of the storm inside him. Instead, he pressed his palms against the desk, leaning forward. His shoulders heaving, he whispered into the empty room, "Why them? Why her? Why not me?" But the walls, the city, the photograph of Clara, none of it gave him answers. Meanwhile, Maria moved quietly through the nursery, rocking Lily until she drifted into a gentle sleep. She hummed a song, low, soft, almost a whisper. It wasn't in English, yet the melody carried warmth, like the memory of a heartbeat. Daniel lingered outside the nursery door, unable to stop himself from listening. It hit him suddenly. The tune. Clara used to hum that very lullaby while pregnant. He remembered lying beside her, his hand on her belly, as she sang to the life growing inside her. She had told him once it was a song her grandmother sang, a melody passed down through generations. His heart seized. How did Maria know that song? He pressed his back against the hallway wall, his breath caught in his throat. Questions stormed through his mind, louder than the city outside. Had Clara known her? Had fate brought Maria here for a reason? And for the first time in years, Daniel Carter, master of control, ruler of his empire, realized he might no longer be the one writing the story of his family. Daniel did not sleep that night. He lay in the vast emptiness of his king-sized bed, staring at the ceiling where the city lights painted shifting patterns through the curtains. The silence of the house was deceptive. His mind roared with questions that refused to let him rest. That lullaby, it echoed in his head, the same soft melody Clara had sung during her pregnancy. He could still remember the way she would hum it while folding tiny baby clothes she had bought too early, full of optimism. He remembered how she would laugh when he told her it was superstitious, that they should wait. "Babies can hear you," she had whispered, pressing his hand against her belly. "They'll know your voice. They'll know mine." But Clara was gone, and he had never sung to his children. So how in God's name, did Maria Lopez know the lullaby? The next morning, Daniel went through the motions of his routine like a machine. Shower, shave, suit, coffee. Yet beneath the polished surface, his nerves buzzed like a live wire. He lingered near the nursery door before leaving for the office, pretending to check his phone while listening. Inside, Maria was with the twins, speaking in a low, soothing voice as she changed them. He caught fragments. "One day you'll see the ocean. It's bluer than your mama's eyes, stronger than any storm." The words sent a shiver down his spine. She spoke to them as though she knew Clara, as though she knew him. He clenched his jaw and forced himself to leave. At the office, Daniel sat through meetings where numbers were thrown around, mergers, investments, expansions, but for the first time in his career, his attention wandered. His colleagues noticed. "You okay, Carter?" one of the partners asked. Daniel nodded, but his hand trembled slightly as he signed contracts. By noon, he excused himself early, something he had never done in 2 decades. He told his assistant he had a personal emergency. Though he couldn't define what it was, he drove home in a fog, barely noticing the traffic that honked around him. When he entered the brownstone, the house was quiet, eerily quiet. He rushed upstairs, his heart hammering with a fear he hadn't expected. But in the nursery, he stopped short. Maria was sitting on the floor between the 2 cribs, her legs folded beneath her. Noah lay in one crib, his tiny hands reaching out, while Lily gurgled happily on her lap. Maria was reading to them from an old, worn storybook, her voice lilting with emotion. The twins gazed at her with utter devotion. Noah kicked his legs in excitement. Lily giggled, a sound Daniel had never heard before. For a man who prided himself on being in control, Daniel felt helpless. That laughter sliced through him, equal parts joy and pain. Why had his children never laughed for him? "Where did you learn that song?" he blurted suddenly, his voice harsher than he intended. Maria looked up, startled but not afraid. "What song, sir?" "The one you were humming last night," Daniel pressed, stepping further into the room. His eyes narrowed, his pulse quickening. "The lullaby. My wife used to sing it." "How do you know it?" Maria's face shifted just slightly. Her lips pressed together before she answered. "It's an old song," she said slowly. "My grandmother sang it to me. Maybe your wife knew it too." Her tone was calm, but Daniel sensed something hidden beneath the surface. "You're lying." His voice cracked. "You knew her, didn't you?" "You knew Clara." Maria lowered her eyes, stroking Lily's soft hair. For a long time she didn't respond, and Daniel's frustration mounted until he was about to demand again. Finally, Maria whispered, "Yes, I knew her." The words hit Daniel like a physical blow. "How?" His voice was low, almost pleading. Maria set Lily gently into the crib and adjusted Noah's blanket before answering. Her movements were deliberate, stalling for time, as though she knew once the truth came out, nothing would ever be the same. "I worked nights at the hospital," she said quietly. "During her pregnancy, Clara was alone sometimes, scared. I found her crying once and I stayed. We talked. I cleaned her room when she couldn't sleep. I listened." Daniel's chest tightened. His mind spun with images. Clara lying in a hospital bed, Maria sitting beside her. His wife had never told him about this woman, this stranger who now held the loyalty of his children. She trusted me, Maria continued, more than I deserved. She said I made her feel safe. Her voice cracked slightly, but she quickly steadied it. I never imagined I'd end up here in your house. But maybe she did. Daniel stumbled backward, his hand gripping the edge of the crib for support. The room seemed to tilt. Why didn't you tell me? Maria finally met his gaze. Her eyes were deep, unreadable. Because you weren't ready to hear it. And because she asked me not to. Those words shattered what little stability Daniel had left. Clara had left secrets that Maria now carried. That night, Daniel could not eat. He sat in his study, Clara's framed photograph watching him, accusing him. He pulled open drawers, searching through old hospital documents he had never bothered to read, desperate for some confirmation. Instead, he found something else. At the bottom of a drawer, beneath a stack of Clara's old letters, was a sealed envelope. His name was scrawled across it in her handwriting. His hands shook as he opened it. Daniel, it began, if you are reading this, it means I am gone. I need you to know something about Maria. Daniel's vision blurred with tears as he read. Clara had written about meeting Maria, about how this quiet, humble woman had been her companion through fear, her comfort in sleepless nights. She wrote about how the babies had stilled when Maria touched her belly, how they had kicked when she spoke. They already know her, the letter said. If I cannot be there, she must. Daniel dropped the letter onto his desk, his chest heaving. Clara had chosen Maria, chosen her before she even knew she wouldn't survive, and in that moment, Daniel understood the truth. His children's laughter, their peace, their quiet, it wasn't chance. It was destiny, but as he folded the letter, a darker realization clawed at him. Not everyone would see it that way. Somewhere, in the shadows of his world of wealth and influence, there were people who thrived on control. People like Dr. Elaine Morris, the renowned child psychologist who had already warned him about emotional overdependence on unqualified caretakers. Clara's so-called friend. If Maria had a gift, if she truly was the key to saving his family, Daniel knew she had also become a target, and the battle for his children had only just begun. Daniel Carter barely slept for the next 3 nights. The letter from Clara sat on his desk like a live wire, impossible to ignore. He had read it a dozen times, every line searing itself into his mind. Each word confirmed what he had seen with his own eyes. Maria Lopez was not just some housekeeper who stumbled into his life. She was someone Clara had trusted, someone the twins had already chosen, even before birth. But there was another shadow within the letter, a warning that gnawed at him more than the revelations about Maria. Be careful with Elaine, Dr. Elaine Morris, Clara's friend from graduate school. The child psychologist Daniel had leaned on in desperation when the twins' constant cries threatened to unravel him. Elaine, with her polished smile and Harvard credentials, who had spoken with such authority it had been easier to obey her than to think for himself. Elaine, who insisted on sterile routines, strict feeding schedules, no emotional indulgences from temporary caregivers. Now Clara's words cast everything in a different light. Daniel tried to dismiss it as grief-fueled paranoia, but then he noticed things he had overlooked before. The way Elaine spoke about the twins, as though they weren't his, as though she had a claim to them. The way she lingered too long during her visits, pacing the nursery like it belonged to her. And most of all, the way her eyes darkened when she mentioned Maria, like a rival, not a servant. On the 4th morning, Daniel entered the nursery quietly. Sunlight spilled through the tall windows, painting golden streaks across the rug. Maria was there, humming softly while folding laundry. The twins lay in their cribs, awake but calm, their little eyes following her every move. Daniel stood in silence for a moment, watching. The image was almost domestic, almost normal. Maria, he said finally, his voice low but steady. She looked up, her expression calm but wary. I found Clara's letter, her hands stilled on the tiny shirt she was folding. For a moment she didn't move. Then slowly she set the garment aside and met his eyes. "She told you," Maria said simply. Daniel nodded. "She trusted you. More than me," his voice cracked. "She wanted you here. She knew. She knew the babies already loved you." Maria didn't respond right away. She looked down at Noah, who had started gurgling happily at the sound of Daniel's voice. She reached into the crib, stroked his cheek, and he quieted instantly. "Clara was afraid," Maria said softly. "Not of dying. She was afraid of what would happen to the babies if she wasn't here. She loved you, Daniel. She told me that again and again. But she also knew you hide behind walls. She asked me to stay close, to be there if you couldn't." Daniel sank into the armchair near the window, his hands gripping the edges of the seat. His world was shifting too fast, and he didn't know how to anchor himself. "I don't understand how this happened," he muttered. "How a stranger, how you became the only person who can reach them. It makes no sense." Maria's gaze softened. "Sometimes love doesn't need sense." Her words struck him deeper than he wanted to admit. That afternoon, while Maria took the twins to the garden for fresh air, Daniel made a decision. He needed answers about Elaine. He called his old college roommate, Matthew Morrison, now a private investigator in Brooklyn. Within hours, Morrison arrived at the brownstone, his trench coat still damp from a sudden rain. He greeted Daniel with a firm handshake and the kind of smile that said he'd seen too many ugly truths in his career. "You're not the type to panic," Morrison said as he sat across from Daniel in the study. "So if you called me, this is serious." Daniel slid Clara's letter across the desk. "I need you to dig into Elaine Morris, discreetly. Background, history, anything you can find." Morrison skimmed the letter, his brows furrowing. "You think she's dangerous?" Daniel hesitated. "I don't know what to think. But Clara was never wrong about people." Morrison nodded. "Give me a week." The week stretched like an eternity. Daniel spent more time at home than ever before, cancelling meetings under the flimsy excuse of needing rest. In truth, he couldn't stay away from the nursery. He found himself drawn there, not only to see the twins, but to watch Maria. She moved through the house with quiet grace, never demanding, never overstepping. Yet every time she was near, the atmosphere changed. The twins smiled more, cried less, and even Daniel felt a strange peace in her presence. He caught her once in the kitchen late at night, making tea. She had her hair pulled back loosely, her face tired but soft. Daniel stood in the doorway, watching her stir honey into the cup. "You never told me about your family," he said. Maria glanced up, surprised. "There's not much to tell. I have a daughter. She's 15, stays with my sister most of the time. Life hasn't been easy." There was more in her tone, unspoken pain Daniel could sense but not name. "You sacrificed a lot," he said quietly. Maria smiled faintly, though her eyes glistened. "We all do for the ones we love." Daniel's chest tightened. For the first time in years, he felt the stirrings of something he thought had died with Clara. Not love, exactly, but the fragile possibility of it. 7 days later, Morrison returned. He carried a thick folder under his arm, his face grim. "You were right to call me," he said, as he sat down in the study. He opened the folder and spread documents across the desk. "Elaine Morris has skeletons." Daniel leaned forward, his stomach twisting. 3 divorces, Morrison began. 2 lawsuits, from families accusing her of overstepping professional boundaries. Her failed adoption attempt, where she allegedly falsified evaluations of the biological parents. The case was dismissed quietly, probably thanks to her connections, but the pattern is there. Every time she inserts herself into vulnerable families, always with children involved. Daniel's pulse quickened. "Are you saying she—" "I'm saying she doesn't just want to help children," Morrison interrupted. "She wants to own them, control them, and if your late wife warned you about her, Daniel, then she must have seen the obsession firsthand." Daniel's hands trembled as he picked up a photo Morrison had included. It showed Elaine with another family, a mother looking distraught, while Elaine stood too close to a toddler, smiling like she belonged there. It was wrong. All of it was wrong. She's dangerous, Morrison said flatly. And if she knows Maria is bonded with your kids, she won't stop until she tears that apart. At that moment, Daniel realized the war for his children's future wasn't theoretical. It had already begun. That evening, when Elaine herself arrived unannounced at the brownstone, her heels clicking against the marble, Daniel felt his gut twist. Maria was upstairs with the twins, unaware. Elaine's smile was sharp, her voice too smooth as she greeted him. "Daniel, we need to talk. About the children." And Daniel knew Clara's warning had come too late, but maybe not late enough. Elaine Morris never asked for permission. She swept into the brownstone like she owned it, her heels clicking across the marble floor, the faint scent of expensive perfume trailing behind her. Daniel Carter watched from the bottom of the staircase, his jaw tightening as she approached. "Daniel," she said warmly, as though they were old friends meeting for dinner. "I'm glad you're here. We need to talk about the twins." Her tone was casual, but her eyes held the sharp gleam of a blade. Daniel's instinct screamed that this wasn't a visit, it was an ambush. "They're asleep," Daniel said evenly. "This isn't a good time." Elaine's smile didn't falter. She set her designer handbag on the console table, her fingers lingering on the polished wood as if staking a claim. Children's schedules should never dictate adult responsibilities. "You know that." Daniel forced his voice to remain calm. "You should have called first." "Oh, I thought you'd be relieved," she replied smoothly. "You've been overwhelmed, Daniel." "And it shows." Before he could respond, footsteps creaked above them. Maria appeared at the top of the staircase, carrying Lily against her chest, Noah drowsy on her shoulder. She froze when she saw Elaine, her body stiffening as though she had stepped into a battlefield. Elaine's eyes flicked upward, narrowing as they landed on Maria. The warmth drained from her smile. "So," she said softly, almost like a hiss, "this is the woman." Maria didn't flinch. She shifted Lily gently, patting the baby's back until the child sighed in contentment. "The children are resting," she said firmly. "They don't need disturbance." Daniel felt the tension in the room thicken, pressing on his chest. He remembered Clara's letter, her warning, "Be careful with Elaine." The next hour unfolded like a psychological chess match. Elaine insisted on sitting in the living room, legs crossed elegantly, her notepad and pen ready, as though she were conducting an official consultation. Daniel sat opposite her, his hands folded tightly, while Maria lingered by the doorway with the twins, refusing to leave them alone. "I've received troubling reports," Elaine began, scribbling notes that were likely more for intimidation than record-keeping. "Your staff has expressed concern about irregularities in the children's care. Irregularities tied directly to Miss Lopez." Maria's name on Elaine's tongue sounded like a slur. Daniel kept his tone neutral. "What kind of irregularities?" Elaine leaned forward, her voice calm but edged with authority. "Unauthorized physical contact, alteration of feeding schedules, introduction of emotional dependency that will cripple them in the long term. I warned you about this. Routine is survival at this age. What she's doing is dangerous." Maria's face remained calm, but her grip on Noah tightened slightly. "The children are thriving," she said quietly. "They sleep. They smile. They laugh." "That is not thriving," Elaine snapped, her composure slipping. "That is manipulation. Infants must learn frustration, independence. They cannot be coddled into weakness." Daniel's stomach twisted. He had believed those words once, when he was desperate, when he thought strictness was the only path. But now he thought of Lily's first giggle in Maria's arms, Noah's steady breathing when she sang. How could peace be a symptom of harm? "Clara trusted me," Elaine pressed, lowering her voice to a whisper meant to cut. "She told me herself she worried about you, Daniel, about whether you could handle this. She wanted me to be here to guide you." Daniel's jaw tightened. He wanted to believe her, but Clara's letter burned in his memory. "Trust Maria. Beware Elaine. You're twisting her memory," he said flatly. For the first time, Elaine's expression cracked. "I gave up everything for this family," she burst out, her voice sharp enough to make Lily stir. "Do you know how many nights I spent with Clara in the hospital? Do you know what she told me? that if anything happened to her, I would be the one to carry them forward. Not you, not some maid, me. The room went deathly silent. Maria's eyes widened slightly, not with fear but with recognition. She had seen this obsession before. She shifted her body, shielding the twins instinctively. Daniel rose slowly from his seat. His voice, when it came, was steel. You should leave. Elaine laughed, a bitter sound. Do you think you can just dismiss me? I have connections, Daniel. Judges, social workers, entire networks who trust my expertise. All it takes is one report from me, and those children will be declared at risk. They'll be taken from you, and once they're gone, do you think the court will hand them over to her? She gestured at Maria with disdain. An unqualified housekeeper with no credentials? Daniel's fists clenched. If you so much as try, but Elaine cut him off with a smile, cold and victorious. It's not a matter of trying. It's a matter of when. After she finally swept out of the brownstone, leaving behind the chill of her threats, Daniel collapsed into his study chair, his face in his hands. Maria stood silently in the doorway, the twins finally asleep again. She won't stop, Maria said quietly. Daniel looked up, his eyes haunted. I know. She wants them, Maria continued. Not for their sake, for hers. Because she lost something once, and now she thinks they belong to her. Daniel swallowed hard. Then we have to fight. Maria hesitated. If you fight her, she'll come harder. She has power. You can't underestimate her. Daniel leaned back, exhaling shakily. Clara warned me. She knew this was coming. He reached for the letter again, smoothing the creases with trembling fingers. She told me to trust you, to protect the children with you. For the first time, Maria's calm exterior faltered. Her eyes glistened, and she turned her head away as though the weight of Clara's faith was too heavy. I promised her, she whispered. The night before everything. I promised I wouldn't let them suffer. Daniel stood, crossing the room until he was inches away. Then we stand together. Their eyes met, his full of desperation and resolve, hers of quiet strength. In that moment, an unspoken alliance formed, stronger than any contract or court order. But somewhere in the city, Elaine Morris was already plotting her next move. And Daniel knew she would not come alone next time. The storm was building, and when it broke, it would test the very foundation of what it meant to be a father, a protector, a family. 3 days later, Daniel Carter's fears came true. It was a Friday morning, grey clouds hanging over Manhattan like a warning. The brownstone was unusually quiet. Maria had taken the twins into the garden for some air, their tiny giggles drifting faintly through the open window. Daniel sat at his desk, Clara's letter spread before him, his eyes tracing the lines again and again, as though they contained answers he hadn't yet discovered. Then the doorbell rang. It wasn't the polite chime of a neighbor or deliveryman. It was a hard, deliberate buzz, unyielding. Daniel's gut tightened. He rose slowly, his hand brushing the top drawer of his desk, where Clara's letter lay hidden, before making his way to the door. When he opened it, his blood ran cold. Elaine Morris stood there in a tailored grey suit, her hair perfectly styled, her eyes glittering with triumph. But she wasn't alone. Beside her were 2 officials from Child Protective Services, their ID badges visible, their expressions grave. Behind them stood a tall man in a navy suit, a briefcase in hand. He introduced himself flatly. Michael Ross, legal representative for the state. Daniel's throat constricted. What the hell is this? Elaine smiled sweetly, stepping forward as if she owned the threshold. Daniel, I warned you. You refused to listen. Now the state will. One of the CPS officers cleared her throat. Mr. Carter, we've received a report of neglect and exposure of minors to unqualified caregivers. We have a court order to evaluate the living conditions of your children. Daniel's pulse hammered. He scanned the papers they shoved into his hands, official seals, signatures, legal jargon that made his vision blur. Neglect, emotional instability, unfit father, all accusations that Elaine had clearly orchestrated. You're not taking my kids, Daniel growled, his voice low and dangerous. The taller officer shifted uncomfortably. We're not here to take them today, sir. Only to observe. But refusal to cooperate could result in escalation. Elaine's smirk widened. Don't make this harder than it has to be. Upstairs, Maria had heard the voices. She held Lily close, her body stiffening as Noah clung to her skirt. Her instinct screamed danger. When Daniel entered the nursery moments later, his face ashen, she already knew. They're here for the children, he said hoarsely. Maria's eyes darkened. Elaine brought them. Daniel nodded, his fists trembling. She won't stop until she destroys us. Maria straightened, pulling both twins close. Then we don't let her. The CPS officers toured the nursery with professional detachment, scribbling notes as they observed. The twins grew restless, their little faces scrunching in confusion as unfamiliar hands hovered too close. Maria sat cross-legged on the rug, humming softly, trying to soothe them. Notice the dependency, Elaine whispered pointedly to the officers. They cry when she's not near. It's unhealthy, but the officers couldn't deny the evidence before their eyes. Noah and Lily calmed almost instantly in Maria's arms, their small hands clinging to her as though she were their anchor. Daniel stood behind her, his presence like a shield. My children are finally healthy and happy, he said firmly. You want to take that away because of paperwork? Elaine's mask slipped for a moment, bitterness flashing across her face. Happy isn't the same as safe, Daniel. They need professionals, not her. Maria's voice cut through the tension, calm but resolute. Children know love. They know safety. They know when someone truly sees them. These babies don't need theories. They need to be held. Her words silenced the room. Even the CPS officers exchanged uncertain glances. But Elaine was prepared. She pulled a folder from her bag and laid it on the desk. Inside were documents, cold, clinical, and damning. Records of sleepless nights. Inconsistent feeding logs, testimonies from your staff about irregular practices. Daniel, this paints a very grim picture. Daniel slammed his hand on the desk, startling everyone. My wife trusted Maria, and I trust her. You think you can bury us under lies, but I have proof. He yanked Clara's letter from the drawer, unfolding it with shaking hands. His voice trembled as he read aloud, If I cannot be there, Daniel, she must. Trust Maria. Beware, Elaine. Elaine's face blanched. That letter is grief speaking, not reason, she snapped. Clara wasn't in her right mind. But the damage was done. The officers stiffened, clearly unsettled. One of them murmured, We'll need to verify this with the hospital records. Maria reached into her pocket. Her fingers closed around something she had kept hidden for months. A small digital recorder. She pressed play. Clara's voice filled the room, fragile but clear. Maria, I'm worried about Elaine. She comes uninvited, talks about my babies like they're hers. Something isn't right. If anything happens to me, protect them. Don't let her near. The silence that followed was deafening. The CPS officers froze. Michael Ross, the state attorney, looked suddenly pale. Elaine's carefully constructed facade shattered. That recording could be fabricated. She stammered. You can't. But Daniel stepped forward, his body shaking with fury. Get out of my house, he roared. Now. The officers left with promises of further investigation, their faces grave. Elaine lingered a moment too long, her eyes wild, her composure gone. This isn't over, she spat. You think you've won, but I'll make sure the court sees the truth. Those children will be mine. Daniel's hand clenched into a fist, but Maria touched his arm gently, grounding him. Elaine stormed out, her heels striking the floor like gunshots. That night, the brownstone was quiet again, but it was a fragile quiet. Trembling on the edge of collapse, Daniel stood at the window, watching the rain streak down the glass. Behind him, Maria rocked the twins to sleep, her lullaby wrapping around the room like a shield. He turned to her, his eyes raw. She's coming back, stronger, with more power. I can feel it. Maria met his gaze, her expression calm but unyielding. Then we'll be ready. For the first time, Daniel believed her. But in the darkness of the city, Elaine Morris was already gathering her allies. Judges, lawyers, bureaucrats who owed her favors. She had lost one battle. But the war for Noah and Lily had only just begun, and Daniel knew the next time she came, she wouldn't be carrying papers. She would come to destroy everything they had built. The storm that Daniel had feared arrived faster than anyone expected. It began with a single letter, delivered by courier early on a Monday morning. The brown envelope bore the seal of the family court of New York. Daniel ripped it open with trembling hands, scanning the words until his stomach twisted. Petition for temporary custody evaluation. Filed by Dr. Elaine Morris. In bold print, she accused him of neglect, of emotional instability, of placing his children in the care of an unlicensed, unqualified individual whose influence poses long-term developmental risks. Attached were sworn affidavits, signed statements from former staff members. Elaine had coerced, painting a picture of chaos inside the Carter home. By the time Daniel finished reading, his hands shook so violently he had to steady himself on the desk. "She's taking us to court," he whispered. Maria was in the kitchen preparing bottles. She looked up at him, her face pale but calm. "Then we fight." Daniel wanted to believe it was that simple. But Elaine was powerful, respected in elite circles, and ruthless. He had seen businessmen crumble under less. This wasn't just about custody. It was about survival. The days that followed blurred into a whirlwind of legal consultations. Daniel hired one of Manhattan's most formidable attorneys, Patricia Holloway, a sharp-witted woman in her 50s with a reputation for tearing apart opponents in the courtroom. "This isn't just about law," Patricia said, flipping through Elaine's petition in Daniel's study. "This is strategy. She's built her reputation on saving children. Judges trust her. If we want to win, we need more than arguments. We need evidence." Maria sat quietly at the edge of the room, holding Lily in her lap. Patricia studied her with keen eyes. "You're the center of this. Elaine has made you the villain of her story. We need to make you the truth." Maria's hands tightened around the baby, but her voice was steady. "I don't care what she says about me. I only care about the children." Patricia's eyes softened. "That's exactly what will save you." The first hearing was set for Friday. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs as Daniel entered, Maria walking beside him with quiet dignity. She wore a simple navy dress, her hair pulled back, no makeup except a touch of lip balm. She didn't look like someone trying to impress. She looked like someone who had nothing to hide. Elaine, by contrast, was radiant in a tailored cream suit, her silver hair gleaming under the fluorescent lights. She smiled at the judge with confidence, her lawyer at her side. She carried herself not as a petitioner, but as a savior. When proceedings began, Elaine took the stand. She spoke eloquently, painting a picture of neglect inside Daniel's home. She described crying infants, erratic schedules, and a grieving father, too broken to provide stability. She described Maria as an intruder, a woman who had inserted herself inappropriately into the emotional lives of vulnerable children. "Infants must learn resilience," Elaine declared firmly. "What Miss Lopez has created is dependency, a dangerous attachment that will cripple their ability to function independently." Her words carried weight. The judge nodded thoughtfully, scribbling notes. The gallery murmured in agreement. Daniel's jaw clenched. He wanted to leap up, to shout the truth, but Patricia's hand on his arm kept him still. "Wait," she whispered. "Let her hang herself." When it was Maria's turn, the room shifted. She walked to the witness stand with Noah on her hip. The baby buried his face in her shoulder, calm as though he knew this was where he belonged. Lily, in Daniel's arms, reached toward Maria with a soft whimper. The judge raised an eyebrow. "Miss Lopez, do you intend to testify holding the child?" Maria nodded. "With your permission, Your Honor." "They're calmer this way." The judge hesitated, then gestured for her to continue. Patricia's questioning was gentle. "Miss Lopez, what is your role in the Carter household?" Maria's voice was quiet but steady. "I was hired to clean. I never expected to be more. But the babies, they needed someone to hold them, to love them, and I could not turn away." Patricia leaned forward. "Did Clara Carter, the children's mother, ever speak to you about this?" Maria's eyes glistened. "Yes, she was afraid. She asked me to be there if she could not. She trusted me." At that, Patricia played the recording. Clara's voice filled the courtroom. "Maria, I'm worried about Elaine. If anything happens to me, protect them. Don't let her near." Gasps rippled through the gallery. The judge's pen froze mid-note. Elaine's face drained of color, her composure cracking. "Objection!" Elaine's lawyer barked. "This is hearsay, unverifiable," but Patricia was ready. She held up Clara's signed letter. "Your Honor, we have written confirmation in Mrs. Carter's own hand, corroborated by hospital staff who witnessed Maria's presence during her pregnancy. This is not hearsay. This is testimony from beyond the grave." The judge leaned back silent, weighing the gravity of what he had just heard. The cross-examination was brutal. Elaine's lawyer tried to discredit Maria, pressing her on her education, her finances, her immigration history. "You're a cleaner," he sneered. "What qualifies you to raise children?" Maria didn't flinch. She held Noah closer, his small fingers tangled in her hair. "Nothing qualifies me," she said softly, "except love. And sometimes, Your Honor, that is the only qualification that matters." The courtroom fell silent. Even the judge seemed moved. He glanced at the twins, both calm in their parents' arms, and then back at Elaine, whose carefully constructed image was crumbling under the weight of Clara's words. When the hearing adjourned, Patricia whispered, "We gained ground. The judge will order an extended evaluation, but Elaine's credibility has been shaken." Daniel exhaled for what felt like the first time in weeks. He turned to Maria, his voice low, almost reverent. "You were incredible." But Maria shook her head. "It was Clara. She saved them. She saved us." Daniel looked at her, his heart swelling with something he hadn't dared feel since Clara's death. Hope. Yet as they left the courthouse, Elaine's eyes followed them, burning with fury. She leaned close to her lawyer, her voice a hiss Daniel couldn't quite hear. But he read her lips. "If I can't have them in court, I'll take them another way." And for the first time, Daniel realized this wasn't just a legal battle. It was a war that could turn deadly. The chill of November wrapped around Manhattan like an iron shroud the morning after the custody hearing. From the outside, the Carter brownstone looked serene, warm lights glowing from the tall windows, the faint laughter of twins echoing inside. But Daniel knew it was the calm before a storm. Elaine's last words still haunted him. "If I can't have them in court, I'll take them another way." He didn't tell Maria everything. She already carried enough on her shoulders. Still, Daniel spent the next few days fortifying the house, upgrading security cameras, installing reinforced locks, and hiring a discreet private security guard who parked across the street in an unmarked sedan. But Elaine was clever, and patience, Daniel soon learned, was her deadliest weapon. At first, her presence came in shadows. Anonymous phone calls in the dead of night, long silences, then a click. Unmarked envelopes slid under the front door with photocopied articles about unfit fathers losing custody. Neighbors whispered of seeing a silver-haired woman lingering at the corner cafe. Across from the brownstone, always watching, always smiling. Daniel confronted Patricia about it. "She's trying to rattle you," the attorney said firmly. "Don't give her the satisfaction. Document everything. The more desperate she becomes, the more the judge will see through her." But Daniel wasn't just rattled, he was terrified. Not for himself, but for Noah and Lily. One evening, just as the city lights flickered on, Maria was folding laundry in the nursery when she heard the faint sound of glass shattering downstairs. Her heart leapt into her throat. She rushed to the window and saw a brick lying on the patio. Shards of the back door glittering around it. Scrawled across the brick in black marker were 4 chilling words. "They belong to me." Maria's scream brought Daniel running. He pulled her and the babies close, his face pale with fury. "She's not going to stop," he whispered. "This isn't about custody anymore. This is obsession." The police came, took statements, and promised patrol cars would swing by the block more often. But Daniel knew Elaine's influence reached far beyond the average stalker. She had friends in law enforcement, colleagues in child services, allies who believed in her crusade. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He paced the study, a tumbler of untouched whiskey in his hand. Maria found him there at 3 a.m., staring at Clara's old photograph. "You think I can't protect them?" he said hoarsely. "You think I'll fail like I failed Clara?" Maria stepped closer, her voice gentle but unwavering. "I don't think that, but I know you can't fight her alone. These children are not just yours to defend. They are ours." It was the first time she had claimed them openly, without hesitation. The weight of her words struck Daniel like a hammer and a balm all at once. For the first time, he realized he didn't just have an ally, he had a partner. Days later, Elaine escalated. It began when Daniel's office called to inform him that social services had received an anonymous tip accusing him of physically abusing Noah. The claim was false, absurd even, but it forced an immediate welfare check. Uniformed officers arrived unannounced, demanding to examine the children. Maria's hands shook as she handed Noah to the officers. "Please be gentle," she whispered. The baby whimpered at the unfamiliar touch, reaching back desperately for her. The officers found no bruises, no injuries. Still, they filed their report, and Daniel knew exactly who was behind it. Elaine was creating a paper trail, layer upon layer of fabricated evidence. If she couldn't win in court, she would drown him in suspicion until the system itself collapsed on him. That night, Daniel made a decision. He called Detective Morrison, the private investigator he'd hired earlier. "Dig deeper," Daniel ordered. "I don't care what it costs. I want everything. Every skeleton she's ever buried." Morrison's team unearthed horrors. Elaine's history stretched back decades. Failed marriages, accusations of harassment, a sealed file in Connecticut involving a foster child who vanished under her supervision. Nothing proven, nothing solid enough to prosecute, but the pattern was undeniable. Elaine latched onto children the way others latched onto addictions. "She sees them as hers," Morrison said grimly, sliding a thick folder across Daniel's desk. "It's not about saving kids. It's about control, obsession, possession." Maria's intuition proved sharper than any legal file. One afternoon, as she rocked Lily by the window, she noticed a black SUV idling across the street. The driver never left, never turned on the headlights. When she peered closer, she caught a glimpse of silver hair in the back seat. Elaine. Maria's heart pounded. She whispered to Lily, "Don't be afraid, Michelo. We won't let her take you." The breaking point came on a rainy Thursday. Daniel was in a conference call when the security alarm shrieked through the house. He bolted upstairs to find Maria clutching the twins in the hallway, her eyes wide with terror. "She tried to get in," Maria gasped. "Through the side gate. The guard chased her, but..." Daniel stormed to the window in time to see the SUV screeching away, its tires spitting water into the street. That night, he held his children close, their small hearts beating against his chest. "She won't stop," he muttered. "Not until she's destroyed us. Or we destroy her." Maria touched his arm, her eyes burning with quiet fire. "Then we fight her with truth, with love, with everything Clara wanted." Daniel looked at her, truly looked at her, and realized she wasn't just the woman who had saved his children. She was the woman saving him. The next morning, Patricia delivered the news. The final custody ruling would be in 2 weeks. Elaine had pushed for an expedited decision, confident her influence would tip the scales. 2 weeks. That was all the time Daniel had to gather evidence, to expose Elaine, to prove to the world that Maria wasn't a danger, but a miracle. But Elaine wasn't waiting. She had already set her final plan in motion. And this time, it wouldn't just be about court documents or accusations. It would be about taking the children by force. The city was cloaked in an icy wind the night Elaine Morris decided to make her final move. The Carter brownstone, though fortified with new locks and cameras, felt fragile under the weight of her obsession. Daniel had sensed it building for days. The silence before a storm, the kind of silence soldiers hear in war before the first gunfire erupts. Inside, the house seemed deceptively peaceful. Maria rocked Noah by the fireplace, humming softly as the flames cast golden shadows across the walls. Lily lay curled in Daniel's arms, her tiny fingers wrapped around his thumb, her breath steady. For the first time in weeks, the twins slept without stirring, but Daniel couldn't relax. He stared at the window, his jaw tight, his hand resting near the drawer where he kept a licensed firearm he hadn't touched in years. He had never considered himself a violent man, yet tonight he was prepared for anything. Maria noticed his tension. "You haven't looked away from that window all night," she said softly. He turned to her, his eyes dark. "Because she's out there, waiting. I can feel it." He was right. Across the street, a black SUV idled in the shadows. Inside, Elaine sat in the back seat, her silver hair glowing under the dim streetlight. Two men were with her, hired hands, rough-looking, silent. Their orders were simple. Break in, grab the twins, bring them to her. Elaine's hands trembled with anticipation as she clutched a small, stuffed rabbit she had bought for Lily. In her mind, the children were already hers. She whispered under her breath, "You'll be safe with me." Finally safe. The strike came just past midnight. The side gate rattled first, a faint metallic scrape. Then the back door's lock clicked, subtle but unmistakable. Daniel was on his feet instantly, his instinct sharper than any alarm. He motioned for Maria to stay low with the children, his voice barely a whisper. "Don't move. Don't make a sound." The intruders moved fast, boots thudding against the floorboards. They weren't subtle. Elaine hadn't sent them to scare. She had sent them to take. Daniel grabbed the firearm from the drawer, his palms slick with sweat. His heart pounded, not from fear of dying, but from fear of failing the tiny lives upstairs. Maria crouched in the nursery, clutching both babies to her chest, whispering prayers in Spanish. "Dios protégelos." "Please protect them." The footsteps grew closer. Shadows stretched across the hallway. Then the door burst open. Two men stormed in, their faces masked. One lunged for Maria, but she twisted away, clutching the babies tighter. Lily shrieked, her cry piercing through the chaos. Noah's tiny fists clenched as he wailed, "Give them to us." The intruder snarled, reaching again. Before he could touch her, Daniel's voice thundered from the doorway. "Get away from my children!" The gun in his hand didn't shake. The men froze, startled by the steel in his tone. For a moment, the room crackled with tension, every second stretching into eternity. Then Elaine appeared in the hallway, her face twisted in something between triumph and madness. "Daniel," she said sweetly, as though greeting an old friend. "You don't have to do this. They belong with me. Clara wanted it." "You know she did." Daniel's fury erupted. "Don't you dare say her name." His voice broke raw with grief and rage. "Clara warned me about you. She saw you for what you are, and she begged me to keep you away." Elaine's composure wavered, but only for a second. "You're weak. You couldn't save your wife, and you can't save them. Hand them over, Daniel." "This is your last chance." Maria's voice cut through the standoff, low and trembling but unyielding. "Clara chose me. She trusted me with their lives. And I will die before I let you touch them." The room fell silent except for the baby's cries. Then chaos erupted. One of the intruders lunged again. Daniel fired, the sound deafening in the small space. The bullet slammed into the wall, inches from the man's shoulder, sending plaster flying. It was a warning shot, but it was enough. The intruder stumbled back, eyes wide with shock. "Out!" Daniel roared. "Now or the next one doesn't miss." The men hesitated, glancing at Elaine, but the fire in Daniel's eyes left no doubt. They bolted, crashing down the stairs in retreat. Elaine remained, trembling with fury. Her eyes darted between Daniel and Maria, who still shielded the babies with her body. "This isn't over," she hissed. "You can't keep me out. The law will side with me. The system always sides with me." Daniel lowered the gun but stepped closer, his voice quiet and lethal. "You're finished, Elaine. The judge has Clara's words. The investigators have your history. And now the police will have evidence of your crimes tonight. You've lost." For the first time, Elaine's mask shattered completely. She screamed, a sound not of anger but of desperation before fleeing into the night. The slam of the front door echoed like a final crack in her empire. The aftermath was chaos. Police swarmed the brownstone within minutes, alerted by the security system and Daniel's frantic call. Statements were taken, evidence collected. The shattered door, the brick with its threat, the recordings from the security cameras, it was all undeniable. Elaine's influence, once her shield, had become useless in the face of hard proof. By dawn, she was in custody, her silver hair disheveled, her eyes wild. Reporters captured the image as she was led into a squad car, shouting incoherently about her children and betrayal. The city woke to headlines of scandal, renowned child psychologist arrested in custody plot. Back inside the brownstone, silence finally returned. The twins slept in their cribs, exhausted but safe. Daniel stood at the window, the first rays of morning light warming his face. Maria joined him, her hand brushing against his. "It's over," she whispered. Daniel exhaled, a sound that seemed to release years of grief and fear. "Because of you. Because Clara was right to trust you." Maria shook her head, her eyes glistening. "Because we trusted each other." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and realized the truth. Clara hadn't left him alone. She had left him a path, a chance at redemption, a chance at family. As the sun rose higher, Daniel turned back to the nursery. The sight of Noah and Lily, sleeping peacefully, filled him with something he hadn't felt since Clara's death. Hope. For the first time, the house felt like a home, and Daniel Carter, once broken by loss, finally understood. Protecting his children had saved him too.